Welcome, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day from my heart to yours. Yeah, so let's just take a moment and let everyone arrive here. Press all the right buttons and get everybody in the room. And so, just a couple of quick announcements. I'm going to try to have a retreat April 9, 10, and 11. That's the weekend right after April. So, if all goes well and um, I know it's been difficult this last year to try to plan anything, but we're going to tentatively book again for April 9, 10, and 11. So that's in, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. So it'd be nice to have you if you want to join us for that. So stay tuned. My assistant said she'll be back in the office in a couple of days, and we'll speak about it together and see if we can put something on the website and put it out on the newsletter. Beyond that, have a very active Friday Kundalini support group that's on Friday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. So it's great if you're in Europe. It's easy for Europeans to join. And I started a new Facebook page to go along with that. Um, and so there's details on my professional Facebook page as a link. If you just kind of scroll down, you'll find your way to find the new group page. Okay, I think I did my part with the announcements. A big thank you to everyone supporting this satsang. Tonight I thought I'd speak about love and consciousness. Love and consciousness. Of course, they're one and the same. It would be traditional, more traditional for me to speak about a deep, kind of blissful, gushy type of love. But I'm going to speak about a different type of love this evening, an impersonal love, a love of the very fabric of what you are, a love of the very fabric of what you are. And by that I mean the invitation to give yourself permission to fall in love with the essence of your being, the essence of your being. My oldest daughter, she's very success oriented. She's all about doing good in school and getting perfect grades and doing a good job at work and this and that. And somewhere, I think she just came into this lifetime with this idea that in order to receive love, she has to first succeed. First succeed. I had something similar as a child, always just striving to do good, to get good grades. And then if I did, I'd notice, oh, I made my parents happy. And this is a kind of a transactional relationship with love, where we've forgotten that what we are is fundamentally good first. That what we are is fundamentally good first. Most of us have forgotten that what we are is divine, that what we are is holy. And as a result of this forgetting, we suffer. And someone wrote me this question. Let me see if I can pull it up here. I believe it's from Nick, but I can't remember, but let's see. Hi, Craig. What had to occur or begin to occur on your journey for you to stop seeking the next spiritual experience or the next opening? What had to occur for you to stop seeking the next spiritual experience or the next opening? So one of the things that happened with me is when I was young, I met my teacher, and right away I started to have powerful spiritual experiences, very powerful, like overwhelmingly incredible spiritual experiences in his company. But then when I would leave the land and go home, I just had normal, ordinary state of consciousness. And it started, my past started with really seeking these really high altered states of consciousness. My teacher never taught me to chase these. It was just like a natural habit that arose. I said, oh, I feel so lovely when I'm in his presence, so I just wanted to be in his presence all the time. But occasionally, occasionally it would snow a lot here in Colorado. And he'd send me up on the roof. Like sometimes there'd be 4 feet of snow on the roof. And he lived in this big house. It was actually an old barn that was converted into a home. Had these huge roofs, and they were really flat. So they had lots of snow on them. So I'd be up there for hours and hours shoveling snow. And in Colorado, we have these big snowstorms followed by brilliant blue skies. And as I would be up there, shoveling, working away, I might slip and fall on the roof, not off the roof, but on the roof. And I'd just look up at this big blue sky. Like the slipping, the falling would make me stop. It'd stop me in my tracks. And I would notice how huge the sky was. On the other side of the valley was a big mountain range. Like we lived up on one side of the mountain range, and then there's a big valley, and then the other side of the mountain range across the valley, and then just mountains into the distance. And I began just to notice the immensity of life. Life was immense. And as I just sat there, just looking at the sky, I noticed that my consciousness began to expand. And rather, I noticed that if I was just still, I noticed that my consciousness was expanding. And that it was actually always expanding. It was always expanding. And even right now, if you can play this game with me, as if you just sit and you stare at the wall, you could stare at me. You could stare at, your ceiling or out your window. And I invite you just to notice the expansive nature of your own mind. The expansive nature of your own mind. Can you notice that there's something here right now that is eternally expanding? Now, there might also be something here that's thinking, or trying to figure it out, or trying to do it right. But if you give up or just step away, unhook from the thinking, unhook from the doing, And just begin to notice how big your mind is. Like how expansive your mind is. I could ask the question a different way. If you can notice the very fabric of your mind, what is that like? So getting back to this topic of love. Love is the way. If you notice yourself fully, if you acknowledge yourself fully, if you pay attention to yourself fully, this is how you love yourself. This is what we do when we are in love. We notice. We notice the smile on our partner's face. We notice the twinkle in our child's eye. I took my little girl sledding today, and we lay in the sled together and go down and just have this crazy, wild experience where we try not to run into a tree. And so I notice her laughter, I notice her giggles, I notice her screams. I notice when she falls off and her daddy continues, down the hill. And I noticing her as a way of loving her. It is the way to love. Showing up for her. And I'm inviting you all to do this for your own self. Can you notice yourself? Can you notice the fabric of your consciousness? And what is it like? Now, for most of us, our consciousness isn't actually that exciting. The human mind is trained to focus on drama, on disturbances, difficulty. We have a mind that we have an egoic mind that's job is to look for problems, literally. But when I was, say, shoveling snow and up on this roof, and I had fallen down, and just looking out at the sky, the thinking mind just stopped. And I noticed that there was something here that was expansive. Now, for many of us, it's helpful to climb a mountain first. We climb a mountain, we stand on the edge of a cliff, we, and look out at the ocean. And your mind just naturally just fills up the horizon. It fills up the entirety of the sky when you go up high. And so just in a sense, by accident, I began to discover this aspect of my own consciousness. And back to Nick's question, hey, Craig, when did it begin to occur on your journey for you to stop seeking the next spiritual experience or opening? And so I love big spiritual experiences. Everyone does. But they tend to come and go. They tend to come and go. What a great question that I had is, what remains? Like, what's here all the time? What's something I can rely upon, whether I'm with my teacher or by myself? What's something I can rely upon? What's something that's consistent and persistent? And so instead of doing what most human beings do, is they fall in love with their partner, just like kind of that bliss of falling in love in the beginning. And then later they fall out of love, after a couple weeks or 6 weeks or a couple months. what I did is I said, I want to know, like, what's here that's awake and aware all the time. I don't want to do this coming and going thing. What's here that's persistent? So I continued to have big spiritual experiences with my teacher. But I also began to pay a lot of attention to the very nature, like the fundamental nature of reality, the fundamental nature of my own mind, the fundamental nature of everyone's mind is space, is peace. If your mind wasn't spacious to begin with, thoughts would not be able to arise. Nothing would be able to arise. Nothing would be able to arise if your mind wasn't inherently spacious to begin with. And I noticed just this very subtle doorway, a doorway of great, immense freedom, through paying attention to the non-dramatic aspect of one's own consciousness. And I hope this makes sense what I'm speaking about. It's kind of like getting up one day and deciding, like, what if I did not pay attention to my thoughts today? What would be here? You notice, oh, there's immense silence here. That this silence is the very fabric of your being. Oh, there's silence here. And this silence is not just a stupid silence, it has a quiet intelligence to it, which is different than thought. And so this is just something I began to train myself in, is paying attention to the silent nature of my own mind. Even if lots of thoughts were arising in my consciousness. And please hear that last point there. What if you paid attention to the silent nature of your mind? Like the nature, the fabric, the essence of your soul, of your being, of your presence. The essence of your consciousness is silence, is stillness, is spaciousness, is vastness, is a quiet, radiant love. And so beginning to pay attention to this more and more fully. And falling in love with this. When you fall in love with this, you fall in love with Buddha nature. You become Buddha nature. You become it. So the state of our consciousness determines the experience of your being. So the state of your consciousness. So if you pay attention to the vastness of your consciousness, you experience vastness. Vastness becomes your everyday experience. If you pay attention to the spacious freedom which is here in every moment, spacious freedom becomes your experience in a permanent way. In a permanent way. If you pay attention to hell, or people keep telling me about, there's a new reality show, The Housewives of Somewhere. You know, I don't know what it is because I can't stand watching those shows, but like when you pay attention to their consciousness and they're gossiping and they're fighting or doing whatever it is those ladies do, you join in that, you know, that type of consciousness, that limited consciousness. If you pay attention to, I don't know what people pay attention to, you know, like rock and roll or whatever, you develop a rock and roll type of consciousness. And when I was young, I was a big fan of punk rock. I had some repressed anger, and so I loved punk rock. I'd go to these concerts, and it's like there's a consciousness there, kind of aggro. I don't want to say hatred, but just like aggro, pushing, fighting, resisting. Fist, putting your fist up and pushing. You get the mosh pit, kind of let out some of that aggression. So that's a different type of consciousness. Now, ironically, when you go to a concert, if you walk in there before the band gets on stage, you'll notice how much space is in the arena, is in the concert hall, is in the warehouse. And that same space is still there while the musicians get on and start tuning their instruments. And it's still there when they pick up the microphone and start screaming into it or singing into it. It's still there. It's eternally there. And so the human mind is trained to look at the contents of consciousness. The contents, like thoughts and sounds, and noises, danger, hopes, dreams, desires. But Buddha nature, like if you want to be a Buddha, you train yourself to focus on this space. And this is a radical act of love for your own self, is to pay attention to the fundamental quality of what you are. We already pay attention to our thoughts and our conditioning, our education, our memories, all that kind of character. We do that enough. But there's a great love that happens from you to you. When you pay attention to the fabric of your being, something begins to light up and begins to radiate. And as this happens, you begin to change. You become a different type of person. A different type of person. It's funny. So I've been married twice, but my oldest daughter's from my first marriage, and my oldest daughter, she called me one day. She's in college, and she said, "Dad, Oscar's dying. Oscar's her was her little wiener dog, And so she invited me to come with her back to her mom's house just to say bye to Oscar. And so I did, and I walked into the house, and I looked at the person who used to be my former wife, and it was like I didn't know her. I didn't know who she was. And she was talking to the person who I used to be. And it was, it was a little shocking to me, because I was like, this person's speaking to me like they know who I am. They were speaking to the old Craig. There's nothing wrong with the old Craig. I'm not saying the new Craig's better or anything like that. But, the old Craig, I was highly identified with the character. Highly identified with him. And of course, living in great suffering. And when I look back at that character, in a sense, it just feels like it was a previous lifetime, a previous incarnation. I don't say it's not me. It's just feels like it was a long, long time ago. And that he couldn't even really arise much anymore. And not because he's bad or because he's wrong, but because I chose to pay attention to something different than like the story and the drama of that young kid's life. I chose to pay attention to the space and the peace. And as a result, like wherever you pay attention, your consciousness will grow in that arena, and your experience will change. your experience will change. And so there's a great opportunity for freedom here through this simple act of paying attention to the spaciousness and the peace of your own nature, the fabric of your being. And I don't care who you are, every single person on planet Earth is made, is sewn of the same fabric. In fact, in a really bizarre way, human beings are so confused. We think we are these individuals, but in reality, we are this one consciousness, just looking out through different lenses of conditioning, different lenses of souls. And so God is looking through my eyes right now. My eyes are God's eyes. God is looking out of your eyes right now. God looking at God. And just like like sometimes I go out in the desert and I ride my mountain bike or my motorcycle, and my sunglasses just get covered in dust. And so sometimes God looks out through the very dusty lens of the character of you. But if the character of you is more living in alignment with peace, then the lenses become clearer and clearer and clearer. And the experience of you becomes lighter and lighter and lighter. But if your lenses get really dirty, the experience of you becomes heavier and heavier and heavier. It's not that dirt is bad or wrong. One of the great ways of cleaning the dirt off our glasses is through meeting the dirt with love, not with judgment. It's a mistake many non-dual teachers make, many spiritual teachers make, many priests make, many monks make this mistake, is they judge the human as a way to get rid of the human. Can you love the human? The more you love the human, the more etheric your experience becomes. Like the more you love the human, the more etheric the experience of being human becomes. Because love makes you feel lighter. When you judge yourself, the character becomes more dense, more dense. So this question, might be wondering, well, Craig, you're not really answering the question. What had to occur begin to occur on your journey for you to stop seeking the next spiritual experience or next opening? When I began to see how profound the fabric of our being is, the firework stuff, seemed less important. So when I started to pay attention to the fabric of my being, the fabric of all beings, the fabric of life, I realized, oh, this fabric is here all the time. There's freedom in this fabric. Immense freedom. It's just an immense open space. It's consistent. And I realized that even spiritual experience arises in this space. People think enlightenment is like a never-ending spiritual experience. Enlightenment is more like the space in which spiritual experience arises, the space in which human experience arises, the space in which all experience arises. When you realize the space, that you are the space, that everything is the space. It trumps everything. It's like, what do they say? The alpha and the omega. It's there before, during, and after. There's great sanity in that. So when you begin to realize this, that seeking for exciting things begins to fall away. And a lot of teachers teach that seeking is bad, or a distraction, or something like that, or an obstacle. For me, seeking was a very helpful thing. Seeking, it kind of, made me ask, like, what do I want in life? Do I want ice cream? I was a hippie when I first met my teacher, and so it was like, do I want to hang out and, I'll just say this, smoke, what do we call it back then? Kind bud all day, like just try to get the best weed. Like, is that really what my life's about? Like, for my friends, that's what it was about. We work and then we just try to score the good weed. Then we started growing it, but I said, no, that I'm seeking after enlightenment. So I gave myself permission to seek and seek and seek, and go to India and follow my teacher and give everything to the path. And I think it's very important developmentally to seek. Because when you seek and then you start to get what you want, you have the experience that rock stars have. Like, you get everything you want. You get all the beautiful ladies, you get the money, you get the, I don't know, the limo, the big house, the toys, but then you realize, oh, this doesn't really make me happy. This doesn't make me happy. I actually want something. I want the experience of happiness itself as my own nature. Like spaciousness, it's inherently, there's just like a quiet, content happiness to it. And so I had so many profound spiritual experiences. I met all these great gurus. I saw incredible cities, Vibhuti pouring out of great master's hands, and miracles and this and that. But even with the miracles, like, oh wow, that's exciting. But then it's done. It's done. I wanted the miracle of consciousness, of God realization. God realization. And so there was a shift in me when I just started to pay attention to the space, like the essence, the very fundamental essence of being, first and foremost. And the funny, ironic thing is as I paid attention to the space more, I started having more incredible spiritual experiences. So I was already having big spiritual experiences, but when you pay attention to the space, your body starts to really relax and really open. Starts to fire on all cylinders. And then God really starts to play with you. And by that, I mean evolve your consciousness and your nature. And then what I noticed that began to happen was when you make yourself a fit container through the realization of what you are, then spiritual experiences come into you and they actually upgrade the essence of your being. And so then spiritual experiences start to become more permanent within you. They're not just things that come and go. It's like the space becomes greater, the light becomes greater, the love becomes greater, the kundalini becomes brighter. The compassion intensifies. So anyways, it's a beautiful question, Nick. Just be careful with the idea that, you should not be seeking. I encourage everyone, like Jesus said, to seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. Seek the kingdom of heaven. Dedicate your life to it. You know, if you're just hanging out at kirtan and just singing bhajans all day and getting high on bliss, well, at some point, you know, you might start to open to something different. You might start to get bored with that and open to something different. But just look around, see what God has to offer, see what life has to offer you, and choose the highest. Most people choose the lowest, unfortunately. So anyways. All right, if anyone has a question, I welcome questions. And I'll say this too about questions, because I had a funny conversation with my 7-year-old. You know, I tell her each evening before I teach, I say, "Hey, Daddy's going to go teach now," and she'll normally like kind of start like walking around like my door, you know, kind of just like peeking her head and just seeing what her daddy's doing. And she'll come in and she'll say, "You're not, you're not teaching, Dad." And I say, "I know, sweetie. I'm just getting prepared. You know, I'm getting ready. I'm basically sitting quietly and opening myself. Sometimes, you know, gathering the questions." And she said, "Well, what do you do, Dad?" And I said, "Well, people ask me questions, and I kind of respond." And I really thought about it for a moment there of, you know, satsang, it's not meant just to be you showing up with a question and me trying to answer that question, giving you the right answer. The invitation here is really for you to join me in this question of what is the fundamental nature of your being? What is the fundamental nature of your being? Like, what is that? And can we explore that together? And so I hope you're joining me in that, not just showing up to see, you know, what's in my head. If you looked at my head, you'd see it's full of nothing. It's full of nothing. And so we want to have this attitude of, you know, if we have a question, we're living the question, we're experiencing the question, the openness of the question, the crux of the question, and not looking just to get the quick, you know, slick answer, the pithy answer, but to live it, to breathe it, to experience it. To experience it directly. That's what this is really about. And so don't take my word for it. You know, if I respond to your question, you feel into it. You feel into it. Join me in the direct experience of it. So anyways, excuse me. David, are you here? Let me see if I can find David.
Yeah, what's
there,
up?
David?
Yeah, can you hear me? Am I audible?
There you are. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I want to say thanks for your spaciousness and silence teachings. They've been very welcomed. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, I have a real easy question basically. It's just during your meditations, when you refer to the central channel, are you referring more so to like almost like a pole going through kind of like all the chakra centers? Or is it kind of more like you know, directly in the spinal column itself, or is it kind of more like in the center of your being through your chakras?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a fair question. Um, so I want you to imagine the central channel is this teeny little tube. It's like a very thin little straw. It goes through all 7 chakra centers. Now, I'm just messing with you a little bit, but that's how it's taught in yoga. Oftentimes, it's this skinny little tube, and you're supposed to draw the kundalini up through, this tube, and there's another tube, and if it goes in the wrong tube, your kundalini will be bad, or it'll be overwhelming or something like that. What I want you to imagine is that you are walking around in a column of light, which is this huge column of light. And it includes all 7 chakra centers, it includes the entirety of your being. And that it's a doorway to grace, a doorway to heaven, a doorway to connection with the absolute. And so when I say pay attention to the central channel, I mean, the big thing that I'm inviting is for you just to get out of the character and to pay attention kind of just to this, like you being a pillar of light, a conduit of light. And for some of you, when you pay attention, it may seem like it's just something real skinny, that goes through the center of all 7 chakra centers. But as you open and as you grow, this column and this pillar will become much larger, much faster. Much faster. And so, if we're going to be exact with it, oftentimes when we sit down to meditate and I look out at the room, I'll see 20 or 30 people, and most everyone's kind of in their character, and they kind of have all their attention here, like in their thinking mind, and they're being so serious and trying to meditate. They're trying to seriously let go of the character and seriously meditate, And then some people are kind of in their heart chakra, and they're kind of, just fighting. They're not really in their heart chakra, they're in their emotional heart center, fighting and trying to let go of their fight, being human. And I'm inviting both individuals kind of step out of that and just more into the center. There's something that happens with you energetically when you just take awareness, which is normally, like, say, out here, just like scanning the environment, and you just pull it in. Even if you pull it in 4 inches or 6 inches toward the center, the nature of your experience changes. It changes very radically, very quickly. Again, most people live here. I think it's called the prefrontal cortex. And if you just come right into the center of the third eye, things become very silent. The same with the throat chakra, same with the heart. On the surface of your heart, like literally, like the skin is almost where the emotional heart chakra is. But if you go in, say 3 inches toward the spine or all the way into the spine, that's where the true heart is. So we call this the central channel, just pulling inward. But as you get comfortable there in the central channel, it's not like it's just this skinny little thing going up your spinal column. It starts to expand from the inside out. From the inside out. There was this moment in history when I believe it was Suzuki Roshi. He was in San Francisco, and they were looking for a new center, and they were moving into kind of this rough part of town. They bought a building where they were going to create their new center, but I think some people were living in the building. It was like an old kind of dilapidated, rundown building, and some people were living in it. There were some gang kind of members in the neighborhood, and the gang guys came up to Suzuki Roshi, and he was just this really short, teeny little guy. and they started to give him hell, and basically tell him to get the hell out of Dodge, get out of town, get out of their neighborhood. And he just looked at them, with this loving presence. And basically, was like, I'm not leaving, And they went, in a sense, like to attack him. But then they felt the strength and the power of his presence. And they're like, oh, okay, we're not going to mess with this old guy. This old guy is fearless. He's fearless. He's not flinching at all. He's not flinching. Like, he didn't flinch at all before these gang members. These, rough fellas giving him a hard time. And then they bowed, they had a deep bow of respect for him. Said, okay, you have your building, you have your center, you do your thing. Because he was living in his central column. And you'll see this, you're a martial arts guy, you'll see this in some great martial artists where they so fully embody themselves, like they're living in the central column. And this central column, again, it becomes like a pillar. And you feel them when they walk into the room. You feel them. You feel this immense presence of light, this strength, this power. There's this funny thing is I went on a retreat once with a friend. I was actually seeing John Burney, and she went up and she sat before John, and she said this funny thing to him. She said, I have this story in my head of what I want to say or what I want to ask you. But when I sit before you, I realize everything I'm saying is just a lie. It's just like a bunch of just psychological just junk that she can't even believe anymore when she sits before this column of light that is John. And it was a funny experience that I used to have with my teacher too, is I could never, I couldn't BS him. I just could never not tell the truth in front of him. And sometimes I'd start to say, but and then I just stopped myself because I realized I'm not going to get away with this. And he wouldn't even tell me to stop. I'd just look in his eyes, look at his face. So yeah, I wasn't going to get very far with this. So when we live in our central column, and basically we're connecting to this power of truth, this quiet, immense, open-hearted power. And all of us know this experience from time to time. The question is can we live it? Can we live it? Can we live it? Yes, a beautiful question, David. So for the purpose of meditation, it's just, I'm just inviting you to come into the center of your being where you know what is true, what is good, what is innocent, what is pure. Like come into your innermost self. And the funny thing is even though like we're coming inward, which could be interpreted as a contraction, as you come into your innermost self, and you begin to realize what you are, you become quite big. So the column isn't this skinny little straw called the shushuma or whatever it is. It's this immense column once you start to open to it. Because God didn't make any of us to be small. God made us to be great. To be great. And for we are God. We are God. All right. Thank you. Let's see here. I believe it's Joe. Joe, are you here?
Thank you. Yes. Hi, Craig, and hi, everyone. Well, Craig, I really appreciate you just sharing your wisdom and just sharing
Yeah.
your stories. And I know that when I run into a rough time, when I don't know what's the loving thing to do, at least I can, think of you and know that, oh, there's someone in the world out there. This is what he would do. And just kind of by having someone like that in my mind, it helps a
Yeah.
lot. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and also, I benefit a lot from people in this group who have asked great questions, and very, very often when I wanted to ask a question, I realized, oh, this person is asking the question I want to ask.
Yes.
And that's why, finally today, I'm going to ask one that, nobody else has asked yet.
Yes.
So, it took me years to learn how to self-love, and it took me a long time to learn how to say no. I mean, even now, when I have to say no, it's still hard for me
Yeah.
because I feel what other people are feeling, and I feel, even people I don't know, I can just walk on the subway and, I'm in New York City, so every day I see so many people and I walk by them and I pick up what they're feeling.
Yeah.
And so once I had an opening, wow, like very often I can be just in public laughing and crying at the same time because I just feel so happy. And at the same time I pick up people that are just not doing well, and so
Yeah.
all that just all came up. So I understand that, part of waking up is also, part of waking up is self-loving, and part of self-loving is understanding there's timing for everything,
Yeah.
So I don't need to preach, I don't need to give anybody a lecture because, again, words don't teach. So I just sort of keep my space and I do exactly what you said, which is you breathe, you feel, you experience.
Yeah. It's very
And you
simple,
just,
isn't it?
yeah, yeah, and it saves lives.
Yeah.
So that's what I do. And I'm in a good place. I'm happy, and I know that I can hold this place, not just for myself, but I can just calm things down when I'm just like, okay, I'm here, it's all
Yeah.
good. When this is all over, we'll go back up there, bouncing on the clouds, playing harps and sing karaoke. So it's all good. But once in a while, uh, when I have to set boundary, I still find it hard because I can feel what the person is feeling. And I know this person is lonely,
Yeah.
need a shoulder to cry on, fear, just like not doing well. But
Yeah.
I know that I only have so much time and I know that I can get exhausted. So how do I understanding that, okay, oneness, but at the same time set loving boundaries and not walk away feeling that, oh God, I have abandoned people, I have
So
abandoned
do,
the
do you
world.
do you trust that those individuals that say you set a
Hmm.
boundary with,
Hmm.
or that you feel that you've abandoned them,
Hmm.
do you trust that they belong to God?
Yeah.
Do you trust that they are connected to God?
Well, God is always connected to them, but they're not necessarily, they haven't really like solidified their connection to God
Yeah.
yet. But
That
I'm
so that
sure the time will come.
that they may not. So do you trust that their suffering is a part of their growth?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the more you trust this, and the more you're able to see that these individuals are actually souls, like they are divine beings,
Hmm.
the more easy it is for you to walk away from them, trusting that they are in their essence. They are in their
Hmm.
essence God. They are in their essence connected to God. They do have everything within them to grow and to heal and to outlive this experience. And so we're trusting in that. We're trusting. we're also trusting that it's God's job to save them, to heal them, to help them to grow and evolve. And it's not just your job. So if we take it all upon ourselves, that it's my responsibility to hold this person's hand and take them from, point A on earth to point B in heaven, if that's my job, there's suffering in that. There's delusion, there's grandiosity, there's a subtle arrogance, like an innocent arrogance. And I'll say this, this may sound harsh, but I almost never worry about anyone that I work with, like almost never. Like occasionally if someone is really, really suffering, I'll say some extra prayers for them, but I don't worry, because I see their soul, I see their divine. Even if someone did something as crazy as took their own life, I trust they make it to the other side. I trust there'll be angels there taking good care of them. And I trust that, that was part of their journey, even if it was a painful, mess. I trust it. And so the more you see the divinity of your own self, the less responsibility you'll feel for other humans. But paradoxically, the more you see the divinity of your own self, the more you'll give of yourself to others. And so it's a little bit of a paradox. It's like you give, but you don't worry. You don't worry about that. You don't worry. And I can even say, in all humility and transparency, there's been times when I've gotten quite angry in the past, quite upset, said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing, or really upset or hurt someone. And when I look back, I see that they're going to be totally fine. And the character Craig, who did the, idiot thing, whatever he did in that moment, he's going to be fine too. That I don't need to judge Craig, and I don't need to worry about, whoever. This is part of being human. It's a messy world. It's a bumpy world. And it's nice when we can all live sweetly and humbly and, hang out and sing Kumbaya together. But, sometimes we need to rub up against each other. Sometimes we need to say no. I mean, one of the most healing things you can do for a friend who doesn't know about boundaries, like if we have a friend who's overwhelming or overbearing, one of the sweetest things we can do for them is set boundaries with them and let them know, hey, you're being too much. You're being too much. Like that's healing for their soul if it's coming from truth. Now, I can say this. Some people, like energetically, are really comfortable with boundaries. Other people like me, like I'm a type 9 on the Enneagram, I kind of have that personality type. I've always hated boundaries because it feels like I'm shutting something down. But when I learned to set boundaries, not from fear, but from a place of love, then boundaries felt really light to me. Really light and healing and necessary. Whereas most people, they set boundaries, especially empathetic people. People who are empathetic, they tend to feel so much that they set boundaries because they are feeling overwhelmed by someone else's feelings. And then they feel like, oh my gosh, I'm hurting this other individual and this and that. But it's really a sweet thing to do, is to set boundaries with others, because you help them to grow. My teacher, he had so many boundaries with me. And I was like, hey, like, here's the deal. If you want to be here, this is what you have to, this is what you're going to have to do. This is what you have to be like. You know, if you go into any temple, and there's a little sign on the door, like leave your shoes on the outside, your dirty shoes. Like they'll bring muddy shoes and you leave it out the door. And as a student, when you see a sign like that, you start to wake up and you begin to have a consciousness in a sense of your feet. My teacher took it a step further. He said, you know, he invited us not to bring our heavy or toxic vibrations onto the land or into the temple. Said, leave it, leave it down by the river. We had to cross this little river before we started driving up the mountain. He said, stop at the river and take, all the confusion you have, throw it in the river, like empty yourself out, clear your energy off, and then drive up the hill. Drive up the hill. And then internally, that became a skill for me as I have a boundary with myself. I wasn't going to let my raging, crazy, wild, egoic self show up to his home. I would I'd let go a lot of that just on the drive up, and then come up to him in a calmer state of consciousness. Not perfect, but just a calmer state. And so boundaries are helpful. They teach us discipline. They teach us to grow. They're good feedback. They're good feedback. And so I encourage you to get comfortable with boundaries, setting boundaries, and getting comfortable disappointing others, because sometimes we disappoint someone when we set a boundary. But I want you to ask a question of, if I disappoint someone, like say you disappointed me right now, you could say, am I okay? Like, is Joe okay? Yeah, fundamentally I'm okay. Is Craig okay? Yeah, Craig, he's okay. We're both okay, fundamentally. On the surface level of our personality, we might feel a little hurt or a little bit offended. I mean, right now in 2021, 2020, everyone was just offended with each other. Just the right, the left, the this, the that, the PC, the non-PC. It was just, everyone was so offended. But a deeper question, when you start to see people on the level of soul, you see, oh, we're all actually okay. Whether we're offended or not offended, whether we want change, whether we want things to stay the same, fundamentally, essentially, we are okay. And more as you trust in that okayness, you really relax around being human and, just the confusing experience of being human. So, was that helpful, Joe?
Yes, that was a huge weight, just kind of like goodbye.
Yeah.
So I feel so much better. Also, thanks for the movie recommendation. Fat Camp was great.
Yeah, what movie?
You mentioned a movie in the last Satsang, Fat Camp.
Oh yeah, the Fat Camp movie. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm glad you like that. Yeah, good. So anyways, well, so nice to have you, Joe, and thanks for speaking up. Yeah, thank you. All right, how about Richard?
Hey.
Hi, Richard.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Good to be here. Happy Valentine's Day. Lots of love. It's so great to be here. I felt in the last retreat that we all shared together that there was a kind of coherence as a group that I have not felt here prior. Like, oh, this sangha is kind of congealing in a healthy and very beautiful way, and I just wanted to express that, and on Valentine's Day, just kind of share my love for y'all. We're kind of traveling together in a really beautiful way. So on that note, absolutely. Craig, I wanted to ask about intimacy. And when I'm talking about intimacy, I'm not talking about physical intimacy, though that could be a part of it. I'm not even just talking about intimacy with significant others, just talking about intimacy general. It could even just be with experience and reality. But I am thinking about other people as a big element of that. And I would love you to talk about intimacy both what does that look like in a healthy way psychologically, from the psychological kind of layer? And then what does also that look like kind of on that kind of spiritual level, the awakening process? And wherever you want to take that question.
Yeah. One of the things about, say, just being human is you will always feel radically lonely if you're not being intimate with life. Like, we are given these hearts, and these hearts are meant to connect. Like, like the internet connects like to a bazillion things at once. That's just what the internet does. Is it seems like we just have one tab open, but really we have a line coming into our home as connected to the totality of human experience. We call it an Ethernet cable. And, everything is just right there. It's right there, just ready to connect. And our heart is the same way. It's designed to be connected without walls to everything. And the way I like to think of intimacy is, people think of intimacy as like, oh, it's sweet, it feels good, and it's warm, and it's affectionate. I like to think of intimacy as the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, when your heart is open, you connect, you feel, like Joe was describing, you feel everything. You feel everything. And right away, it's going to be overwhelming if you don't have these other two qualities to balance it. So the first quality I spoke about a lot tonight. So if you don't know about peace and vastness and spaciousness, if you just are connecting on a heart level to life, you become overwhelmed. But when you have this radical open-hearted connection with radical peace and radical strength, in the sense, there's like this trifecta of experience where there's room for the ugly, there's room for the bad, there's room for overwhelming beauty, grace, and divinity. There's room for humanness, there's room for problems, there's room for difficulty. Today, we got a couple feet of snow here in Durango, and I was out working on the snowblower, and there's these bolts on the machine. At like the snowblower basically has got these, like, I don't know what they call them, like arms, and they kind of gather up the snow. And if you get a rock in there, or a stick, there's a little bolt in there that breaks. And so that, if a kid or someone's arm got in there, it wouldn't rip it off. It wants just to throw snow. It doesn't want to throw, anything heavy. And so the snowblower just kept breaking today. I don't know what it was. I kept running into ice or rocks or something. And it's kind of a frustrating experience because, I was just getting dumped on today with snow. And I was taking my gloves off and work with these bolts. And if you ever work with tools in the snow, getting snowed on, it's just, it's not the funnest experience. But I just noticed the radical intimacy, say with the cold, with my fingertips, the bolts breaking with the machine, this Zen-like, just flurries landing on my face, my eyes, my glasses, the chill of the cold, the wetness of the cold, seeing this absolute beauty here, the body feeling like kind of curled up and tense and feeling intimate with that. And so with intimacy, it's being intimate with it all and not turning away from it. Not turning away from it. And if you look at your human ego, is we turn away from things we fear, we turn away from things that are uncomfortable. And well, there's just suffering in that. There's loneliness in that. Your body is not meant, it's meant from a survival perspective to turn away, but from a human perspective, a heart perspective, from a humanity perspective, you're not meant to turn away from life. You're meant to join in life. And so, and when I was young, I had a choice, to take the monastic path, but just something just kept calling me out into the world, more and more into the world. Something called me to be a father. Something called me to just be fully engaged with life, the messiness, the rawness of life. And that calling, it's called, of course, it's called all of us to meet life with intimacy. You can't be a wimp. You just can't. You have to be strong, because this world, it just beats the hell out of you. It just does. And like, I got beat up real young, and I chose to shut my heart down. I became jaded really young, and I realized, gosh, this is kind of hell to be jaded. It is hell, not kind of hell. It is hell to be jaded. I want to connect with everything, with everything. And I'll say this with it's funny, because not everyone wants to connect with you. Not everyone wants to connect with you. I was kind of laughing with my wife the other day. I said, "Oh, there's this fella at jiu-jitsu, and I don't think he likes me, but I keep showing up, and I'm keep being his partner, like his wrestling partner, his rolling partner." And jiu-jitsu is about as intimate as it gets. You're choking the other person, you're breathing, you're bleeding on them, like, he kicked me in the face, gave me a fat lip. I made him bleed, all over my gi. And it's, and I was just confused. I was like, why does he want to talk to me? Like, why does he like, and my heart just has this sense, and there's an arrogance to this, that, oh, everybody likes me because I like everyone. Like, my projection is I like everyone. I love everyone. And so it's confusing when I look back and see, that someone doesn't like me. And there's a good chance the guy's just shy, or he's just confused by me. Because a lot of times I just walk up to people and I talk to them like I already know them. Because with intimacy, you feel close to people. You see their soul. And my wife, she tells me, she's like, you can't just talk to people like that, Craig. And I'm always like, why not? So what's the proper way? I mean, I'm not like a British proper person. I'm not really polite and well-mannered. I tend to just go up and just start going like this and expecting this, expecting love. And when other people are there with me, it just feels magical. When people aren't there with me, it feels confusing. I still love them and still feel their divinity and see their goodness, but I just get a little confused why anyone would want to be shut down or jaded. Of course, I understand from a place of compassion, but sometimes I scare people with my intimacy. And a lot of times, if I see them like getting kind of freaked out, I'll look behind me like, is there someone dangerous here? It's like, oh no, they're scared of Craig. And so but the thing is I trust that they're going to be okay. And so I just like to go and kind of just jump in the ring with people and just trust that we both have big enough hearts to deal with each other. And even if I'm not being my highest self, or if I'm being a pain in the butt or whatever, I trust that they're okay and I'm okay. That we're all okay. I trust that I'll never do it perfect. And that's okay, and they'll never do it perfect. And so a fun game to play is to notice, with intimacy, you cannot be guarding your ego all the time. With intimacy, it's just kind of a sense, it's a perspective of, to be intimate, you have to be open. So you can't be in your mask, and you can't be playing the game of, I'm waiting, for someone to offend me or to upset me or to say the wrong thing, or, if they do say the wrong thing, a fun thing to do is like, well, what if I did not shut down? I mean, I do this with my wife all the time. She gives me a hard time a lot. And I'm like, I notice a tendency to shut down, but what if I just don't shut down? What if I just keep loving her despite her attacking me? I actually do this with all my daughters. I live in a house with all these girls. They're always just attacking dad. And they're like, well, what if I just don't shut down? If I just keep loving them and keep staying open? Because if I shut down, I suffer. Sometimes people want you to shut down in life. They want to kind of put you in your place. It's very confusing for others if you don't shut down. Like if they're mean to you and you don't shut down, or aggressive or harsh, or if they're really honest with you, saying something that's like, hey, you need to improve upon this. And that's one of the things my teacher used to say. He said, Craig, listen to everyone. And even if like they're saying something crazy, about you, he used to say, I bet there's probably 5% of it's true, 10%, 20, maybe 50% true. And can you listen and be open to that? Can you be intimate with that? Can you be intimate with that? And this is a very necessary component if you want to be awake in an abiding way. You have to be open to feedback, harsh feedback, troubling feedback. You have to be open to attacks. I mean, you have to be open to everything. Because to be free, like that was a great question of mine, was what does it mean to be free all the time? Not just some of the time, but all the time. What does it mean? In a sense, it means to not shut down. Like, what if I live in a way where I don't shut down? And the first thing that the ego thinks of is like, whatever that movie was, Wizard of Oz or Dorothy, whatever it was, with the witches, they go out in the rain, they're going to melt. The ego, when it's attacked, is like, oh my God, I'm melting, but it's like, am I really melting? Like, am I really? Isn't there something here that's not melting? What is that thing that's not melting? What is that? And if we truly want to be intimate, we have to know that thing. The thing that doesn't melt, the thing that doesn't crumple. A lot of pseudo-spiritual people, they play around with intimacy in all these weird ways. They like to be lovey-dovey, gushy, and do cuddle piles and this type of thing. But they don't want to feel anything uncomfortable. And like, it doesn't work that way. You don't get just to have the good, affection, warm, fuzzy thing without the other thing. It has to include the bad and the ugly. Or we'll just be, someone chasing experience, like I think Nick was asking about in the beginning. So this is really a big deal, is if we're truly going to be awake, intimacy is just a way of life. And it comes down to just a real basic question. Am I willing to feel everything and not shut down? Some people are willing to feel up into the moment when they start to tear up. They're like, oh my God, I'm about to cry. I have to shut down. It's like, why? Like, are you afraid of crying? Like, why would anyone be afraid of crying? Or being intimate with, how about a panic attack? I learned to become quite intimate with panic attacks, and then they don't scare you anymore. They don't scare you. They don't scare you. And so intimacy not only is it a doorway to great love and bliss and like all this kind of, wonderful spiritual things, also a doorway to immense strength and indestructibility. They're also a doorway to immense clarity. Because again, we need peace, clarity, we need strength, we need love. If this is going to be a foundational thing. A foundational thing. Another thing, because you asked about relationship, I could say, sometimes intimacy, so many people think that intimacy is just about feeling, but in relationship, intimacy has so much to do with listening. Like listening to our partner, listening to our friends, listening to co-workers, just listening, empathetically listening to their words, their body language, their experience, and even listening to the nature of their soul, like I was inviting Joe to do a moment ago, is you listen and you see them. You feel them on the level of soul. It was funny because I've met with so many people over the last, 15 years or so. I've met with some individuals who've had such harsh egos, like really harsh, crude, just kind of narcissistic or just, neurotic egos. And yet their souls were so beautiful. Like their presence is so beautiful. And you start to live this paradox with intimacy where it really messes with your egoic perspective, because the ego perspective scans people, says who's safe, who's not safe, who's desirous, who's ugly, who's good, who's bad, whatever. But when your heart's really open and you start to see people on the level of soul, you start to fall in love with everyone, even if they're really mean people or vile people. It's a funny thing. It's a paradoxical thing. And I can just say this. I've said this a bunch, but when this really starts opening up in the beginning, you have to be careful, because one of the things I did, and it's an amateur mistake that most people make, is when this intimacy starts opening up, one thing is people start taking their clothes off too quick. That wasn't really my problem. But my problem was I would tell people how much I loved them. And it really freaked people out. It really confused people. But now I just kind of stopped saying it. I just feel it. But there was just something in me that just, God, I love you so much. You're so beautiful. And people were just thinking that I was going to ask them on a date or something. I'm like, no, I wasn't doing that. There's just this exuberance, like sometimes our heart is chained for so long and there's such heaviness in our heart. And when your heart first starts to open, we have like a 60s experience, Woodstock, everyone's just taking off their clothes and falling in love and doing eye gazing. But, so we want to have a discipline around that, because a lot of people get in trouble with that. Me, I got in trouble just telling people how much I loved them and telling people how beautiful they are. And I don't care if it's a gas station clerk or I just walk up to someone or tell someone in the park, or, person working at the cashier. But you just see beauty in everything. I'd fall in love with an old dog, like in the park or something. The scene. I can remember I was in Central Park once, and my heart was just so open, just everywhere I looked. It was just like, my God, you're beautiful, and you're beautiful, and you're beautiful. And look at this little dog, because in New York City people have these little miniature dogs. Oh, look at this little puffball, so beautiful. And look at the trees, and look at the skies, and then falling in love with, like skyscrapers, and then, being in Columbus Circle and going and taking the escalator down to Whole Foods and falling in love with, underground Whole Foods, in the basement of some skyscraper in Manhattan. It's just like, it's just silly. It's silly. And so there's a caution there, just to be careful, because most people get in a lot of trouble in that department. And it can just get messy. Because we all project our state of consciousness onto the world. And the world's not always where we're at. Sometimes the world is just in suffering or in confusion or in whatever world they're in. And we're in bliss world. I've been drunk on bliss, too many times to count. And I've run my mouth too many times to count, when I've been drunk on bliss. And it's good just to put yourself in check, reminding yourself, okay, we're sharing a reality as well. But anyways, I hope there was something there of value, Richard. Yeah, good to see you. Okay, let me just check in the chat here real quick. Hi, Craig. After Satsang, I've been pondering deeply during the week about God. Yesterday's God's invitation was experiencing enormous emotional pain due to hidden trauma. At the same time, I experienced love beyond words, a love far from emotional. It was all-encompassing. Thank you, Craig. Something was revealed. It is a follow-up of what you have been inviting to us. So what Lisa was bringing forward here was that intimacy that I'm speaking about. Was that intimacy. And there's this thing that happens when you're intimate with something, especially if it's something you're afraid of. Your heart will grow to be greater than that thing you fear. It's like the resources will come alive within you when you begin to face something that you fear. Because fear is not greater than what you are. But it's through the doorway of fear, through the doorway of facing trauma, that your heart actually grows. It expands. Your true nature actually expands. It comes more alive, more online. And so this is a beautiful invitation that Lisa's sharing for all of us, is to grow in this way. To grow in this way. All right. Okay, just one last question. This one's from Mike. He wrote a lot about his experience, but the gist of his question was, he was in a really good place spiritually. He had a lot of kundalini energy. It really calmed down. And then basically it started rising again and rushing really intensely, a lot of pressure in his head. And he's wondering if he messed up and if he went backwards. And I'll just say this is an evolutionary world, Mike. We only go in one direction on the path. And it's only forward. My teacher, after a period of time, he refused to call a retreat a retreat. He called them advances. He said, we're going to have advances because we're not retreating. We only go forward. We only go forward on the path. And so with spiritual experience, with kundalini, with energetic experiences, sometimes you awaken to something that's quite overwhelming. And you breathe, you feel, you open, you experience, you practice more, you do yoga. And that energy seems to calm down and integrate. You say, oh, I've done a good job. I'm done with that. Well, then a month later, that energy comes back more fully, more intensely. That doesn't mean you've messed up. That means God is inviting you to open more. God's wanting to give you more grace, for you to receive more grace. It means God has faith in you, faith in your soul, and is blessing you with overwhelming light. And your body, is telling you, I'm not ready to receive all this. And so the invitation is can you grow into it? Can you relax more fully with your experience? Can you practice more yoga? And can you open your heart more fully? Can you trust more in the energy than in the resistance? Can you open and trust more fully? This is the question. Can you open and trust more fully? You have not messed up, my friend. God is thinking that she's blessing you with more light. Your body may be disagreeing, but God thinks she's blessing you with more light. Take it as a blessing. Greater the light, greater intensity, the greater the intensity, the greater the resistance in the body. But that just means God wants you to do more work, greater opening and healing. God is blessing you with the energy of liberation. God's wanting to push you over the edge. Push you over the edge. If you identify with your small ego, you might say, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good. I did wrong. But God's up in heaven saying, I love you so much. I'm going to give you more. I'm going to give you more. So anyways, all right. And Mike, I'm going to invite you to our Kundalini group. You might benefit from that. So everyone, if you came late, stay tuned for a retreat, I believe, tentatively. I know Mercury's in retrograde, but tentatively, April 9, 10, 11. So I guess that's 2 months from now, 7 weeks or so. Put it on your books. We'd love to have you. Be similar format as last time. Thank you, everyone, for your donations. Thank you for sharing your heart with me, for sharing your beauty with me. I'm going to invite you all to take Richard's question. Now, what does it mean to be intimate? In a divine way, in a human way, with all of life. With all of life. So much love to each and every one of you. Good night, everyone. Bye for now.